Hello, everyone. My name is Mike Vaughn, and today I want to take a dive into the fascinating world of films featuring the infamous Hannibal the Cannibal Lecter, post Silence of the Lambs. It's quite surprising that none of these movies received a Thanksgiving release date, considering the culinary irony. In this discussion, I want to explore the films that follow the iconic Silence of the Lambs character and share my thoughts on the overall effectiveness and consistency of Hannibal's character throughout the series. And I'm also going to be giving some context behind each film and my own reviews. Before we begin, please consider giving this video a like and subscribe to the channel for more great content. Now, back to the video. In Thomas Harris's novel Red Dragon, we are introduced to one of literary's most intriguing yet chilling characters, Dr. Hannibal Lecter. Known for his sinister charm and intellectual brilliance, Lecter is a psychiatrist who captivates readers with his charming personality and dark secrets. Dr. Lecter is portrayed as a distinguished and sophisticated individual. His expertise in psychiatry is renowned, and he possesses an unparalleled understanding of the human mind. Despite his menacing reputation, Lecter's charm and intelligence often disarms those around him, making him an even more formidable figure. Lecter is not only brilliant in the world of psychiatry, but a gourmet chef as well. His passion for culinary arts is evident in the legendary dinner parties he hosts, where he delights his guests with exquisite dishes. These gatherings are a highlight in high-class society, showcasing his refined taste and exceptional cooking skills. However, beneath the veneer of sophistication lies a disturbing truth, because Lecter's culinary creations may just include human flesh, adding a macabre twist to his gourmet persona. This chilling aspect of his character adds a layer of horror and fascination as readers grapple with the duality of his refined elegance and gruesome appetites. If this wasn't unnerving enough, Hannibal was based on a real-life person. As author Harris tells it, in the 60s, he was working for a magazine and found himself on assignment to interview a mental patient named Dyke Simmons, who was pending trial on 3 murders. While in prison, Simmons was shot by a prison guard and required treatment. Enter prison doctor, whom Harris referred to as Salvador. As Harris recounts, the doctor was a short man with flaming red hair and, more importantly, carried himself with a level of elegance that impressed Harris. The two began to talk about, quote, the nature of torment, which both fascinated and unnerved the young writer. Later, a guard took Harris aside and told him that the good doctor was actually a savage killer who had a talent for packaging his victims into tiny boxes. This clearly stuck with Harris, who based Dr. Salazar on Hannibal Lecter. Red Dragon by Thomas Harris is a gripping novel that introduces readers to the complex world of criminal profiling and the chilling nature of serial killers. Acting as a foil to Red Dragon is the character of Will Graham, a former FBI profiler with an exceptional gift for understanding the minds of the most dangerous criminals. Will Graham is not your typical protagonist. He possesses an uncanny ability to delve into the psyche of serial killers, which makes him invaluable to the FBI. However, this talent comes at a personal cost, leaving him mentally and emotionally scarred. Despite his retirement, he is drawn back into the world of crime solving by his former boss, Jack Crawford. Crawford seeks Graham's expertise to capture a new and terrifying threat known as the Tooth Fairy, a serial killer whose crimes are escalating in brutality. In his pursuit of the Tooth Fairy, Graham finds himself seeking the assistance in an unlikely ally, Dr. Hannibal Lecter. Lecter is a brilliant psychiatrist and notorious serial killer imprisoned for his heinous crimes. Will Graham and Hannibal Lecter's relationship is definitely what I would call complex and fraught with tension, as Lecter's motivations are never entirely clear and his intelligence makes him a dangerous ally. The interaction between Will Graham and Hannibal Lecter are at the very heart of Red Dragon. Graham's need to understand the killer he hunts is mirrored by Lecter's fascination with Graham's ability to empathize with them. This dynamic creates a psychological chess game where the two characters must navigate their mutual need for each other's skills and the inherent dangers of their relationship. In both Silence of the Lambs and Red Dragon, Lecter is described as followed. Lecter's eyes were a striking shade of maroon, casting an eerie red glow that seemed to peer into the very soul of anyone who dared to meet his gaze. This unsettling feature was complemented by his small, sharp white teeth that gleamed menacingly in the low light. His hair slicked back with precision, framed by a visually striking widow's peak, adding to this sinister allure. Though he was short of stature, and we love a short king, Lecter's presence was anything but diminutive. He carried himself with an air of authority that demanded attention and respect. His voice had a raspy, metallic timbre to it, which seemed to resonate with an unnatural echo, leaving a lasting impression on anyone who heard it. Perhaps the most intriguing aspect of Lecter's character was his penchant for self-transformation. Red Dragon was a bestseller, so it was only a matter of time before Hollywood would come knocking. In 1986, the story was reimagined for the big screen under the new title Manhunter, which was directed by the talented Michael Mann, known for his unique cinematic styles and ability to create tension and atmosphere. The film was distributed by the renowned De Laurentiis Entertainment Group, a pretty big player in the industry at the time. The group was led by the legendary mogul Dino De Laurentiis, who was instrumental in bringing Manhunter and Hannibal to the big screen. The film's stylish direction, haunting score, and compelling performances have earned it a special place in the thriller genre, paving the way for subsequent films featuring the infamous character Hannibal Lecter. Secession star Brian Cox would be the first person to play the blood-soaked Dr. Lecter, and it's honestly kind of strange watching his first live-action take on this character. And it's really good. There is something very chilling and understated about how Brian Cox portrays Hannibal. In a recent interview, Cox had some insight into playing Hannibal. Where I came from was Peter Manuel, a serial killer who terrified us all in Scotland when I was a kid. The other person who influenced me was Ted Bundy, who was the exact opposite, very charismatic, but with the sort of politician's charisma. I saw Lecter as a kind of cross between those two personalities. I also played down the psychosis. A chief difference between my portrayal and Tony's was that Tony played him crazy, whereas I played him insane. And there's a difference between madness and insanity. Harris would follow up Red Dragon with the better known The Silence of the Lambs. The book was a monster hit, and Harris knew he needed to give Hannibal a juicier part. Sure, Hannibal is still mostly in his cell, but that doesn't remain the case, and we truly get to see just how terrifying Lecter is. Despite Manhunter not doing well at the box office, MGM/Orion Pictures stepped up to produce the film adaptation and Lecter's second live-action outing. However, a legal battle would affect the future of Hannibal post Silence of the Lambs. The short version goes like this. When DEG bought the rights to Red Dragon, contracts stated that he, meaning De Laurentiis, had the right to option the character for future use. However, since Manhunter was a flop at the box office and with critics, Dino lent the rights to the book and Hannibal to Orion for free, which in hindsight is really insane. Because, of course, Silence of the Lambs was a huge hit and scooped up the, quote, Big Five Oscars that year. Of course, with this kind of fame and notoriety and money, the creative team of Jonathan Demme, Jodie Foster, and Anthony Hopkins wanted to return to explore more of Harris's realistic yet twisted world. Yet Orion Pictures went bankrupt with Universal Studios entering the picture. Now, keep in mind that Dino still owns the rights to Hannibal, the character, and at the time, he and Universal were currently working together on the cult film Army of Darkness. However, things would dramatically change when Dino wildly sued Universal. In a nutshell, Dino felt like he was being blackmailed into giving away his rights to Hannibal, the character, and there was an alleged verbal agreement that Dino made with Universal head Tom Pollock. The deal would see a 50-50 split of the budget for the Lamb sequel. Yet, Dino wanted additional money, roughly $200,000 from Universal to finish Army of Darkness as part of the deal. Universal agreed to this request provided that they let them co-produce and distribute the Lamb sequel. Thus, Dino felt like he was being put in a corner and, as he called it, blackmailed. After the lawsuit, Universal countersued, stating that the mogul had made a verbal agreement. Thankfully, both parties came to some kind of understanding and the sequel was, at least from a legal perspective, ready to go. Yet Harris had yet to finish the sequel novel. Finally, after legal battles and waiting for its author, the film, simply titled Hannibal, was released in 2001. And the film was a big hit, raking in over $300 million at the box office on an $87 million budget. However, notably absent was Jodie Foster and Jonathan Demme, along with screenwriter Ted Talley. The reason has been kind of up for debate, though one strong theory is the book Hannibal just simply wasn't very good in both their eyes and a lot of critics. It would be what we now would call problematic. The strong, brave heroine of Clarice Starling is really downgraded in the novel and felt like a major step back from Silence of the Lambs. We are also introduced to a wildly offensive queer villain character named Margaret Verger. However, the bow on this turd was the shock ending, which sees Hannibal and Clarice as romantic partners sailing off together. Like, what the actual hell? Jodie Foster rarely talks about Hannibal, but we've been able to glean two possible reasons for her not returning. One, she didn't like how Clarice was portrayed in the book, and two, what I think is probably the case, she just simply wasn't paid what she felt like she was worth to reprise her role. And the wage gap for actresses was then and now still very much a real thing. So don't get it twisted. I'm not implying that Foster was being greedy here. I think she was perfectly right in wanting to get what she felt like she was worth. After all, outside of Hannibal Lecter, she really is the central character and the heart of Silence of the Lambs. Ridley Scott came in to direct, and Julianne Moore played Clarice, which is interesting as rumor has it Moore actually originally had auditioned for Clarice in Silence of the Lambs. More importantly to this video though, Hopkins was paid handsomely to return as Hannibal Lecter. Hannibal is a really lean, mean little thriller. It takes the worst parts of Harris's novel and either deletes them or certain parts are streamlined and just made better to suit the big screen. Gary Oldman, holy crap, he shines as Mason Verger, this amazingly weird new character that feels like it fits the tone of this movie, which is very off-kilter, though it's based in, I guess, some sort of reality. Silence of the Lambs perfectly sets up this division between Starling and being in a male-dominated career, that of the FBI. In Hannibal, she seems to be used as a political scapegoat in the wake of things like Waco, which that event is actually name-checked in the movie. Starling is a character that is kind, virtuous, and she isn't afraid to tackle monsters like Buffalo Bill. And while, yes, Hannibal and now Mason Verger are this movie's baddies, we get another villain, one rooted in more reality, that of FBI agent Paul Krenler, played by the late, great Ray Liotta. And I don't know, he's seemingly just as horrific as the other villains, but for very different reasons. And he and Hannibal make for a fascinating inverse of one another, and the filmmakers take this concept and really run with it. The scope of the film is amazing, with the Italian setting, the score is haunting, and the cinematography is lush, expressive, and at times beautifully eerie. In 2002, we got Red Dragon, which aimed to be a more faithful adaptation to Harris's novel. Neither Scott nor Demme returned, yet in their place, we got, of all people, Brett Ratner, who was best known, at least at the time, for his Rush Hour films. Ted Talley, the original Lamb's screenwriter, also returned to take one last stab at the world of Lecter. The film was both a hit at the box office and with critics. Hell, even Roger Ebert, who notoriously didn't really care for the horror genre, gave the movie a 3.5 out of 4. Red Dragon was a really interesting movie to rewatch. It's somehow fast-paced, but also lets its characters settle and develop and really blossom. While Hannibal is more of a fever dream of a movie, Red Dragon takes a more police procedural, minus the stuffy by-the-numbers cop cliches. The movie has flair, but it is certainly grounded in somewhat reality. Though Ratner was always known as a comedy director, and as much as I hate giving this man any credit, I was shocked by how good he is at crafting a really nice, tense thriller. Sure, the movie is a little bit paint by numbers at times, but everything works so incredibly well that I didn't even mind some of its flaws. Hannibal himself is just as scary and cunning as ever, and of course the characterization is spot on. Red Dragon closed out a chapter in a film series, as it is the final film with Anthony Hopkins playing Hannibal Lecter. And he said as much in interviews, and you know what? He has made good on that. Honestly, as much as I love Hopkins in the role, I'm totally fine with him just closing out that chapter. The fact that Hopkins only played Hannibal 3 times really does make these films feel special. Though Hopkins stepped away from the role, it would not be the last time we would see the character in live action. The final feature film in the Hannibal series, at least at the time of this recording, is 2007's Hannibal Rising, which explores Hannibal's childhood. Hannibal Rising was panned by critics and was a bomb at the box office. Hannibal Rising has some interesting ideas, and honestly, I don't out of hat totally hate the idea of a Lecter origin story.
Gaspard Ulliel,
as Hannibal is truly chilling and makes a feast out of the role. The way he emotes and uses his body language sets the table for a very unnerving performance. It's too bad, however, the movie is at times a very plotting and cliched affair, despite some really interesting set pieces. Despite it not being part of the films, I would be remiss and y'all would just tear me apart if I didn't mention the Hannibal series. Mads Mikkelsen does an amazing job making the character his very own, and honestly, this was not an easy feat considering just how iconic Hopkins was in the role. In interviews, Mikkelsen described his take on Hannibal as a fallen angel and went on to describe him as seeing the beauty in things that most people would perceive as very grotesque or very ugly. In an interview with GQ, he goes into a little bit more detail, stating that instead of, quote, going down a dark alley via imagining all this death, he simply substituted all that death into something he finds legitimately beautiful. And I think this is brilliant. It is really a fascinating way to really arouse the passions in a character like Hannibal without also not emotionally and mentally draining yourself. Hannibal Lecter is such a wonderfully complex character who artfully blends intelligence, sophistication, and, of course, a chilling menace. This multifaceted nature captivates audience as they are drawn to the psychological depths and the moral ambiguity he embodies. He represents a character that is hard to classify and challenges our perceptions of villainy and charm. In exploring his character, We are not only wildly entertained, but also we're invited to reflect on the complexities of the human psyche, making Hannibal Lecter an enduring figure not only in the literary world, but the film as well. So, I hope you all enjoyed this video. I really wanted to get something kind of fun out there for Thanksgiving. It's so awesome seeing the uptick in subscribers. It really means the world to me. Like, I am so overwhelmed and humbled. Y'all are so awesome. And I will see y'all in the next video.